Good evening. My name is Laku Chidambaram, and I serve as the interim dean of the Price College of Business here at the University of Oklahoma. It's my distinct honor to welcome you all to tonight's event. Tonight's event is part of the Price College Dean Speaker Series, the flagship speaker series that attracts an outstanding mix of exceptional leaders who provide insightful perspectives and inspire thought-provoking discussions. These discussions are important avenues for students to get real-world perspectives from people who don't just talk the talk, but also have walked the walk. And there's none better that fits that description than our keynote speaker, Scott Tinker, whose talk is entitled, Seeking Energy Truth. This event is made possible thanks to the generous support from our sponsors, Williams. For more than a decade, Williams has partnered with Price College to help develop well-prepared graduates. Just to give you a couple of examples, Williams has supported initiatives to scale tutoring services through a peer-to-peer platform. And earlier this fall, they sponsored the first-year Price Kickoff event, which was attended by over 1,000 Price College students. Recently, our partnership has expanded to benefit more programs and students through unique learning experiences, like tonight's event. On behalf of everyone at Price College, thank you, Williams. You've truly been a wonderful partner in Price College, and we are very grateful. Thank you. Now I have the honor of introducing Paige Cole and Sarah Delgado, representing Williams, our sponsors for this evening's event. Paige Cole has worked at Williams for 23 years and serves as the Human Resources Program Manager for University Relations. She's a graduate of OU and holds a bachelor's degree in public relations. Paige is the past president of the OU Club of Tulsa, has served on the President's Advisory Council of OU Tulsa, and was a recipient of OU's Regents Alumni Award. She's also an avid OU sports fan through thick and thin. Yeah. Sarah Delgado serves as the Director of Branding and Corporate Social Responsibility at Williams. She oversees the Williams Foundation, corporate sponsorships, and volunteerism at the company. She's a graduate of the University of Kansas and has been with Williams for 28 years. Please join me in welcoming Paige and Sarah to the stage.
Thank you, Interim Dean Laku. I'm excited to be here on behalf of Williams and to have Dr. Scott Tinker as our speaker this evening. You're in for some fascinating information that will definitely spark conversation. Williams is proud to be a sponsor of this speaker series. It provides insight and education to students, faculty, and staff, and invokes meaningful discussion about the energy industry. Like OU, Williams has a history spanning more than a century and a shared commitment to always doing the right thing. Today, those principles continue to energize our employee culture, innovate our problem solving, and power the promise of a sustainable energy future. In case you aren't familiar with Williams, every day we handle approximately 1/3 of the natural gas in the United States that is used to heat our homes, cook our food, and generate our electricity. We supply clean natural gas from coast to coast in 24 states. In fact, we supply more than half of New York City's natural gas, and in Washington State, we provide the majority of their natural gas. We have employees throughout the country, and many are graduates, like me, from the University of Oklahoma. Our partnership with OU is essential to the next 100 years as we continue to evolve and innovate. And now I'll ask my colleague, Sarah Delgado, to introduce our speaker.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Dr. Tinker is a global explorer working to bring industry, government, academia, and non-governmental organizations together to address major societal changes in energy, the environment, and the economy. With Dr. Harry Lynch, Dr. Tinker co-produced and is featured in the award-winning documentary films Switch and Switch On. I would highly recommend you watch those. Dr. Tinker is the host of Energy Switch, an energy and climate talk show appearing on over 200 PBS stations and on major podcast channels. He's also the voice of Earth Date, featured on over 450 public radio stations nationwide. In his visits to 60 countries, he has given over 1,000 keynote and invited lectures, including a TEDx on the dual challenge, energy and environment. He also serves on many public, private, and academic boards and councils. Please welcome Dr. Scott Tinker.
All righty. Thank you. It's good to see you. Nice turnout tonight. I know you have a lot of things to do, including a little volleyball game, I understand, between OU and A&M going on tonight. So I appreciate your being here. You'll probably see me at that game later. It should be a good one. Thanks for letting a Texan into Oklahoma. You know, appreciate that. I actually lived in Oak City 3 years when I was young, in the early 60s. That dates me. And I remember it fondly because Hefner Road was being built. And I wasn't supposed to cross Hefner Road, but I did. And I got a good paddling. So my butt and I remember Oklahoma City with great fondness. And it's indelibly inscribed. Anyway, so it's good to be here with you. We're going to have open Q&A afterwards, too, during this. So they've asked me to speak to you for about 6 hours. And then we'll get into the question part. But anyway, hopefully we'll have some fun. Let me get started with this thought. I'm not here to tell you what to think, okay? Universities don't do that. We kind of help us all think. Well, instead, we're going to share some data. Hopefully, have some civil dialogue amongst us and have a little fun along the way as well. Because when we're laughing, we're learning. So I'm going to kill you with philosophy right off the bat. Mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Wouldn't that be nice? Civil dialogue, critical thinking. You don't have to accept everything I say tonight. You probably won't, and that's okay. But we can sure entertain some of these thoughts together. So as we go forward, I'm going to frame it this way. These triangle diagrams. Energy security, very important. It underpins economic security. The healthy economies in the world have access to secure energy, and it allows for them to do what? Invest in the environment. Okay? Healthy economies invest in the environment. We want it affordable, we want it reliable, and we want low emissions. Wouldn't that be nice if you could have it all? But you can't. In the real world, if you want 100% low emissions, you're not going to get much of anything else. This is just the trade-offs world. And trade-offs aren't bad. You got to compromise, look at data, really get in where the meat of the problem is. And I've called that for a long time the radical middle. You know, it's a good place to be. It's radically lonely and it's radically hard, but that's where things get solved. So that sets up our frame tonight. We're going to talk a little about energy poverty, a little bit about energy, climate, and the environment, and share some thoughts. So let's get into the energy piece. What is it? Okay, what is energy? This is hard, so if you want to spontaneously applaud at the end if I don't mess it up, that'd be great. Here we go. What is energy? Well, it's our homes and our phones. It's our pets and our jets. It's our heaters and our beaters, our water, our daughters, our sons, and everything they wear. It's our packs and our snacks, our frames and our games. It's our paste. It's our waste. It's our light, our sight. It's our stuffy nose, our clothes. It's our wheels, and it's our meals. Everything depends on energy. All right, thank you. That's your Dr. Seuss moment. All right. But a lot of us think about the gasoline and the electricity, but we don't think about all this stuff. Everything depends on energy, right? Energy powers the world, it improves lives, but the tough reality is that there's a lot of people in the world that don't have it. They don't have shelter, they don't have clean water, they don't have food, they don't have light, okay? And this is one of the great challenges. Now look, there's 3 kinds of people in the world. Those who are good at math and those who aren't. So Which of the three are you? So let's do some little simple arithmetic here. This is how much a human being consumes in these countries, and we filmed our second film in Ethiopia and Kenya, parts of it. And here's my fridge. Okay. My refrigerator consumes 9 times more electricity than a person in a year. And I have more than one fridge. Geologist, I like beer. We have a beer fridge. We keep it in the garage in Houston, beautiful. That's efficient. So 20 times more than a person? This is energy poverty. That's what it looks like. It's vital. Energy is vital for human flourishing. And we understand that here. And I've been lucky. I've been in 60 countries. And this is color-coded by the number of visits. Not an airport. It's actually deep into most of them. Made a couple films. And along the way, met people. Met this man about my age in Ethiopia. He had tears in his eyes when he told me he'd come out of the bush with his kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Here's some of them. And they were in school for the very first time, something that they'd never had before. We go over here to Nepal and meet Sanakanchi. She's cooking indoors with wood, spend a lot of time. Like 2.8 billion people in the world still do. Indoors cooking with biomass of some kind. We go to the Seti Memorial Hospital nearby and watch kids die. It's a tough part of the film, real tough, of breathing indoor smoke. The particulates and moms getting cancer and cataracts. 3 million a year are dying of this every year. 3 million people. That's what COVID-19 killed in 2021. 3 million every year, very solvable. Back to Africa, we find a school, this is Kibra, a large slum outside of Nairobi. Light bulbs dangling from the ceiling. It doubles as a school and a church. I remember punching in to take this picture, these kids in uniforms coming across mounds of pollution to get to a school and start to get some education, something their parents never had. Vietnam and the red shack, we meet Thon, who carried her crippled son on that plank every morning to get him into a school. We spent time in there with her in her home. You go to India and you see a whole different level of poverty in many places, and a whole different level of wealth, a remarkably disparate spread when you get into India. And then finally back to the Western Hemisphere, into this village of Gunchukwa, and this is where the Awako people live. Mud huts, thatched roofs, they've lived here for 500 years. We brought first solar there over a period of a week. You'll see it in the film, switch on. That's the array on the left, 3.5 kilowatt. About half of what you'd put on a house here. But it put light bulbs in those huts and ceiling fans and one refrigerator. These kids, the kids of the Awako, half of them will die before they become adults. And real simple things too, a tooth infection or diarrhea. Wouldn't kill us, but they don't have the medical services. That last night with the Mamu or the chief was really powerful. Turned on that light switch, and you'll see us counting it down. And they'd never seen each other in their own village at night except over a fire. Remarkably powerful moment in many different ways. And this is the world we live in. I'm not going to talk about ESG tonight, environmental social governance, except this minute. The environment matters in a lot of the world. Clean soil, clean water, clean air, it matters. Social, give me a school. Or how about some health care? Governance, get me out from under this autocrat. So I have a voice. We voted last week. Many don't get that luxury. A remarkable amount of optimism and hope, my observation is, in people that see their future brighter than their present, all over the world. And then there's pessimism and fear, and it worries me. And it's not, it's rural folks, massive protests. It's urban folks. These are young people protesting capitalism, and this is in Europe. And I love the gathering, don't get me wrong here. Get together and think and make your voice heard, but burn capitalism. I'd love that sign to say, end global poverty. And what a remarkably powerful undertaking that would be. And by the way, you would see the results of it every year, because Gandhi reminds us poverty is the worst form of violence. It is the absolute worst form of violence. This is the countries in the world. This is the energy consumed per person against the electric power consumed per person. There's a strong relationship. The more energy, the richer you are on a per capita basis. There's a lot of countries that sit below the level of my fridge. Okay, a lot. Billions of people. As we move up through that, you start to see in the mid-range here, kind of $300,000 to $20,000 a year, total income. more energy consumption. Let's call that emerging and developing. And at the top end, the rich world, us, we consume a lot of energy and we make quite a bit of money, more than 70 grand there. So you see this huge disparity. The emerging wants to become developing. And the developing want to do what? They want to become developed. And they should. Energy shouldn't limit it. This is very doable. But look closely, again, at the color scheme. There's only a few countries in the world that are secure with energy and actually economically. And there's a whole lot that aren't. 5 to 6 billion people in the world today. Same color scheme now on a map. Look at where it happens. Per capita income, these are the least livable cities in the world. Look where they are. Reds and yellows, poverty, poor. It's not poor everywhere, but for the bulk poor. Subequatorial, here's the most livable cities, and guess where they are? The rich nations. No surprise there. The emerging, those in the bottom left of that graph, again, spread everywhere, but subequatorial concentration. They're living in energy poverty for the most part. They need something affordable just to get started, just to turn on those lights for the first time and grow from there. The developing world and the purples and those colors, they've got some energy, but it's not secure to them. It comes and goes. The fuels come and go. The lights are unpredictably on and off. And this is all over the world in many places. They need reliable energy. Okay, and 60% about 5 billion people. You saw it on the graph, you can see it on the map. And I put out a piece called Net Zero Poverty. Actually, the editors write titles, but this is what it's about, is lifting the world from poverty. And then the developing world in blue, us, we want climate security. We want it clean. Where's the cleanest, what's clean mean? We think atmospheric emission, but how about clean air? Where's the cleanest air in the world, the stuff you breathe? The green nations. Where's that? Where it's rich. Where's the dirtiest air? The red nations. Where? Where it's poor. Poor countries can't afford to clean up the environment. There are other priorities they're working on just to keep going. This strong relationship between the economy and the ability to lift yourself up from poverty and invest in the environment. So you bring all that together and you realize things vary tremendously around the world. Security is not this thing. It's really tremendously variable across the globe today. And it creates this paradox. Energy won't end poverty, but we can't end poverty without energy. Okay, and I think I said that in Quito the first time to a small group of investors, business people. It's time to power the people. You know, it's time to lift everyone up. Energy access for all, affordable, reliable energy for all. And this is one of the critical challenges of our time. So let's talk about energy. My slides are all color-coded. Gray's coal, green's oil, red's gas, nuclear, hydro, et cetera. Every time you see these colors, that's what you're looking at. So we used to cook indoors with wood and heat ourselves back in the day, like the day, thousands of years ago. The first form of energy is the sun. It's the oldest. It grew the hay that the vehicles of the day used to move themselves, okay? We captured the motion of wind. We captured the movement of water. We built bigger dams. We killed whales. We lit our homes with the oil. This is old energy. Thousands and thousands of years. And then we found this thing called coal, where nature densified it. You burn coal, boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, run a generator, and you get light. And that changed the world. This is the modern world coming into place. Liquid hydrocarbons, not just carbon coal, hydrogen in there. Refine it, put in our vehicles, methane, CH4, more hydrogen than carbon, and then nuclear, okay? So here we sit. And this is modern energy. This is the new stuff in terms of time. Yet we have Sana Kanchi, like almost 3 billion other people living the way humans always have in the world today. And why am I showing you this? This is a really important concept in energy. It's about, through time, energy has gotten denser. What does that mean? It's on a log scale, by the way. It means the bang for the buck. How much energy per unit of weight do we get? Nuclear energy, through time, you see it here, is 1 million times denser than wood or dung, which is still being used. And both of those are a lot denser than a battery by unit weight. Okay, 1 million times. If you take out and so dense energy is very secure to us. If you take out the nuclear, so you can see the scale a little bit more, on the right end here you have the gases, and they're denser. by unit weight again. They don't seem, they're gas, but when you put them in an equivalent weight, they're denser. And they don't have the sulfur and the nitrogen and the mercury particulates, a little bit, but nothing like the solid fuels do. And where would wind and solar and others fit? You can't weigh them. So it's hard to put them on this scale. They'd be down in here somewhere, but a smart guy named Václav Smil came up with something, a different kind of measurement. Energy per unit area, watts per meter squared. And you can see the same trends, and we have names for these things, energy by area. We call them renewable. I'm sure you've learned this. I was in classes today. We raised our hands. And thermal. We call them clean and dirty. You've learned these things. I know if you haven't, your kids have. We call them, and this is a little judgmental. All right, maybe clean, maybe dirty. Industry came up with intermittent and reliable. Of course, different terms, or weather dependent and firm. It's all kind of true. Depends on your perspective. Let's just talk about electrons and molecules. Stuff on the left makes electricity for the most part. You can burn molecules to make electricity, and we do at large scale. But you need molecules for other things. It takes a lot of heat to make cement and steel, plastics, fertilizers from ammonia. We need molecules and we need electricity. About 25% of the energy in the world today is electricity. 75% is still molecules in the world today. I said to Senator Manchin's hearing just a couple years ago, we've got to not just be completely factual. We've got to try to be factually complete. And that's hard. That's what we're trying to learn here in universities. Factual completeness. It's brutal. It's hard to get all the facts right. So let's give an illustration. These are the data, the global data of the energy we consume, same color scheme. Coal and oil are still going up. We're consuming more coal and oil than we ever have in the world. They're very dense. You saw the data, but they make a lot of CO2 when you burn them. Okay. Natural gas is going up tremendously, so is nuclear. They're very dense, but they don't make as much carbon dioxide when you burn them. And then you have hydro and wind and solar and other things. They're not as dense, but they don't make much CO2. Okay? So there are trade-offs. If you're thinking in the CO2 world, there's trade-offs back and forth here. Remember the Great Recession of '09? Some of you do. When the world goes into recession, we consume less energy. There's the dimple, and here's COVID. There's the down dimple there. We aren't moving around as much in global recessions, but we're right back consuming as much energy as we ever have. Nothing changed structurally during COVID. We consume more coal and oil than everything else in the world combined today, by a lot still. That's the data, not my data. It's the data, okay? And nothing has gone down. We talk about transitions. I'm supposed to be a global expert. Nothing has gone down. We're consuming more of everything still, up and to the right, okay? Even wood and hay. Now, wind and solar are the fastest growing sources. This is completely fact. They're growing exponentially, starting to go linear, and it's remarkable that growth rate that's happening. What would make it a little more factually complete, because this is what you'll hear on the news, fastest growing, if I scale them, and we take a look at them in the data, there they are, they were in the data before, that's factually complete. They're a piece of the growth of our energy demand, but we consume so much energy. Wind and solar represent about 5% of global energy today after 20 years of growth, and that's remarkable growth rate actually. It takes a long time for these transitions to go on. How about coal? Well, the rich world, we've built on coal, make power, turn around generator, light, but it's cut in half in the rich world. Here's Asia, coal, and here's the rest of the world, hardly any coal. So when you look at this, you kind of get overwhelmed, and here it is on a map. Asia dominates in coal, some in South Africa, Eastern Europe, but Asia dominates. It's an Asian story. Unless you're Germany, and you lose your gas from Russia, and then what did Germany do? They went back to coal for their reliable electricity fuel. And at the same time, they closed their last 3 nuclear reactors, which would make more electricity than the coal plants. And climate scientists were aghast, and they should be. This starts to get confusing politically as you work your way through it. And what's the message here? In crisis times, and even most times, most leaders in the world prioritize energy security over climate security. And I know you're not going to like me saying that, some people, but don't look at the words, look at the actions. What do leaders do when they need secure energy? And COP29 is going on today, and we can talk about that in Q&A this week and next week. What else is growing? Well, these are oil and gas. In the percentage, that's the mix, it's unchanged essentially. Just 55 to 60%, 60 years ago, same percentage today, and actual units way up. Gas growing at a faster rate than oil in that same amount of time. So when you take coal, which you've seen already, and I'm gonna put natural gas right on top of it, coal's an Asian story, natural gas is an everywhere story. Every region in the world is consuming more gas, except for Europe, which is kind of flat. In fact, the gas to coal ratio has gone from 39% to over 90% globally, gas to coal. Gas will pass coal in the not too distant future. It's a global story. So when you look at it by region, here's how much is consumed. North America leads for gas, and here's how much is produced in each of those regions. Okay? There's only 2 regions in the world that consume more gas than they produce, Europe and Asia. Everybody else is producing as much or more than they consume. This is important. And by the way, the reserves in these regions are not great. Some have the resource, they won't produce it, others don't have the resource. And so they're moving a lot of gas around, liquefied natural gas, to meet their needs. They need options to gas, I get it. So what has Europe done with electricity generation? Again, a reminder, electricity is about 25% or less of total energy. So we're only looking at the power sector here. Europe has brought down coal, brought down gas, brought down nuclear, brought down hydro, and grown a solar and wind sector for the power sector. And that's nice. I mean, the right side has more options in it than the left side. And this started back in 2007-ish timeframe. Energiewende in Europe, led by Angela Merkel at the time. Flat electricity consumption can be good. Efficiency can be bad. You're not making as much stuff. Okay. But here's the variability of that power sector, and it looks pretty good today. Policy underpins that. It wasn't Ukraine or anything else. This was decisions by policymakers to go this direction. How's it working? Well, it's expensive. Okay. 40, 50, 60 cents a kilowatt hour for power? What do you pay here in Oklahoma? 10 cents, 12 cents? So 400 or 500% more for electricity. In our class today, we talked about the cost of energy influencing businesses. When it's expensive, it's hard. So that's very expensive. But I heard solar and wind are cheaper, right? Well, yeah. Yeah, right. What does this mean? What does it mean? You've heard it. Solar and wind are now cheaper. It's all over. What does it mean? It's completely factual. But is it factually complete? It means at the plant gate, where the electron is generated, solar and wind have gotten remarkably cheap. Where it's generated, the turbine and the solar panel. But it has to go from there to you, right? And to get from there to you 24/7 at night, and when it's cloudy and not windy, something else has to be there to back it up. That something else is expensive because it's redundant and it's not always on. That makes it expensive. Reliability is expensive. You can see it in the data. This is the percentage of solar and wind in all European countries, and it doubles the more solar and wind you have. It's not perfect, but it's up and to the right. And I'll isolate just 4 countries. Poland has a lot of coal, same color scheme. Norway, hydro. France, nuclear. Germany, solar and wind, 40% or more. It's expensive to the consumer to get it to you. What has that done to the economy? Remember the relationship? Energy underpins economies. The United States has been growing. We've had a little surge in the last 3 or 4 years. China was catching us, had a little drop off, but both up and to the right. What do you think Europe looks like? Here it is. That's 2007. Largely flat in economic growth. Look, this is a tough picture for Europe. Affordable wild energy, it underpins healthy economies. Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be. And the great coach John Wooden said that. Europe needs to think hard about change, and so do other wealthy economies. How do you balance all of these things? Same scale, this is Europe, watch close, this is the United States. We consume a little more electricity. Ironically, in '07, we went flat as well, but that mix on the right looks a little different. There's a lot more red in it, the natural gas piece. That's shale gas. That's hydraulic fracking. Opened up resources and reserves that were not economic before, and they weren't economic for a while there either. They've kind of become economic in the last decade or so with a lot of work. In fact, this is important. We've gone from 4% oil from shale just, 17 years ago? To 60% from shale now, oil. And gas from 7% to over 60%. Coming from shale in this country. 60%. Natural gas, these data finally came out this year from DOE. They put them out annually. They finally came out. Natural gas on a normalized basis, about $13 in a unit, MMBTU. Here's heating oil. This is residential, by the way, propane, kerosene. And here's electricity. It's over 3 times more expensive than gas. And we're trying to electrify everything. Okay. Now, there are trade-offs. I showed you that. It doesn't mean gas is the only thing. There are trade-offs, but we've got to think about the economics of these things. Let's take a look. California has made some decisions 20 years ago about their electricity mix, and Florida, same scale, a little bit more. That looks different, doesn't it? I saw some of your faces. Let's just isolate the difference. That's a different set of policy choices. California has gas, by the way. They're not producing it. So this is a solar wind. They import electricity. That's the other. Here's Florida's. What has that done? Well, one comparison, we look at the cost. Florida's gone up a bit in that time, and so has California a bit more. 3 times more. Texas is benefiting from this, if you call Californians moving to Texas a benefit. All right. Maybe they'll come your way too. It's great. Hello, Elon. Hello, Joe Rogan. That's Austin alone. That's a big difference. There's a lot of industries leaving California, just like they've been leaving Europe. It's expensive. California just approved a 2-digit rate hike just recently. Like, the date on this is 10/22 this year in electricity prices again. Same story in oil, only Asia consumes more oil. North America is second. Here's where it's produced. There's 2 regions in the world that consume a lot more oil than they produce. Asia and Europe don't have great reserves. They're importing it on tankers. They need options to gas, I get it, or to oil, I get it. So enter the electric car. Those in the front can see the license plate says electrons, and they're charging it with diesel, okay? These are diesel generators making electricity to charge a battery. Now look, it's funny, it's ironic, it's remote Australia. It's not representative, it is funny. This is representative. The reality is, and it's impressive, the number of electric vehicles sold is going up. Almost 1 in 5 today in the world. A vehicle isn't a car. This is another little thing. It's anything with a motor and a battery. A scooter, a 2-wheeler, a 3-wheeler, anything with a motor and a battery is a vehicle. Cars included. But still, 1 out of 5. Where? Where are these being sold? Who needs the options? Say it. I'm a professor. Who? Loud. China. Okay. China. And China's exporting 2/3 of those vehicles and competing with Europe in a big way. Where else? Europe. Here's the US. And here's the rest of the world. 85% of the EVs, China and Europe. They need them. Good on them. Optionality. But does everybody need them? 55 million sold to date. If that continues, we're going to need a lot of charging connections to charge vehicles. It's one of the great challenges. How many are we going to need if we're growing? Well, I don't know. I didn't have any accurate numbers, so I just made this one up. Okay? Studies have shown accurate numbers aren't any more useful than the ones you make up. How many studies showed that? 87. Right? So let's just make up a number. What the number that was made up was, we're going to electrify half of the world's vehicle fleet by 2040. Okay. 1.4 billion vehicles in the world. We're going to electrify 700 million of them. We have 55 million today. It's going to take 300 million charging stations. We can fit our 55 million vehicles in here and take it up to 700 million in 15 years. That's a lot of growth. You know what this is? A floor bed of a Tesla S. You know how many batteries are in it? Not the battery pack. How many batteries, let's call it, how many cell phone batteries are in this car? 7,000. One car. That's what it takes for a nice sedan. Okay, 7,000. Let's do some simple arithmetic. Make it 5,000, a little smaller car, times 700 million vehicles, 3.5 trillion batteries that wear out. We've got to do some math. 3.5 trillion. We have maybe 100 billion, couple maybe in the world today, all our gadgets. This is a big number, and that's why this is here. Kilograms per vehicle, the raw materials, these are the metals over here we talked about today. 500 to 600% more to make an EV than a combustion engine. Not the car, the fuel in the battery. Just takes more metals, all right? And so you can say X polluter on your EV in Colorado. How many think mining is green? You know, it's different, not a criticism, but mining does some pollution. And I took this picture in Michigan, kilowatt on the Tesla. Yeah, kilowatt of electricity. To charge it, same story, kilograms per megawatt, 500% more for solar and wind than coal and natural gas. This isn't judgment, it's physics. Low density energy takes more to collect than high density energy, just more stuff. Panels, turbines, and batteries. All right, so this is a challenge, and yeah, Tesla in Alberta, coal powered, says it right on the license plate. They know where their electricity comes from. And the Lambo gave up, doesn't even give a crap. It says CO2, right on the plate. All right, put it right out there. So where does it come from? These are the countries, oil and gas, the top 3 producing countries. The US is in there today. Remarkable change. It won't always be. Top 3 today. And here's the top 3 producing countries of these 5 key metals. And yeah, that's not a bad spread. That's where it's extracted. Where is it processed? Who owns the supply chains? Watch close. Boom. Brilliant, by the way. China, Belt and Roads and other initiatives have bought the supply chains for solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries. Who needs them? Okay. They need the options, and they're selling it. Brilliant. Okay, now you got to understand this. And it's not just that, chokehold on graphite now and lithium, polysilicates, et cetera, et cetera. Brilliant move. They control the supply chains. We're moving perhaps the fuel for our vehicles today from OPEC dominated to China. And that may be okay, but you better understand it and think about the security ramifications of that as well. Transportation options. Look, small vehicles, electrify them. Hybrids, EVs, not as heavy, not as much weight in the battery, so I can move around in cities. As that vehicle gets bigger, you're carrying more weight in the fuel. Batteries aren't as efficient, you're hauling a battery around, so maybe fuel cells or compressed natural gas. And the bigger planes, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, I'm not getting on a battery plane. All right, I promise. Even if it was there, I wouldn't get on it. Elon's not flying his rockets on batteries. There's a reason for that. Dense, dense, dense we need for large things. And I put out a piece in Fortune, when you start mandating these things away, reducing options, markets hate that. You business majors, markets hate that. Yet our proud Tesla driver in Colorado, no oil, no tires, no plastics, no electronics, no knowledge. I'm here with you tonight because you are going to be smart. You're already smart. You know where this stuff comes from. It may as well say, I love mining, And the senator from Colorado is a close friend of mine, John Hickenlooper. He's a geologist. He gets it. He understands this. He's a Democrat. The number of states proposing mandates grows. This is a little bit old. We'll see what happens now with the EV mandate world. And you can't buy that diesel truck in California unless they sell an electric one of the same size. These are what mandates or incentives do. Markets don't like it. So let's get to the environment and CO2 a bit. This is the carbon dioxide in the rich world It's been flat for several decades. I guess, pat ourselves on the back. We've doubled our economies. Here's Asia, and here's the rest of the world. Asia now produces more CO2 than the rest of the world combined. And it's not because Asia's bad. Important graph. Here's why this happens. Above the red line, countries consume more stuff than they produce. And below it, they produce more stuff than they consume. The United States makes 5 billion tons of CO2 making our own stuff, but we still consume more than that. China makes 10 billion tons, you've seen the data, of CO2 making stuff. They produce more than they need. Most of the non-rich world, the non-OECD, are producers. And the rich world, us in Europe, we're consumers. And we say, send us our stuff. It's a technical term, watch close. Asia makes our stuff, and we get it one item at a time on an Amazon truck. Hey, I got a toothbrush, you know. That's efficient, right? So it's coming to our, and we want it cheap. We want it now. We're effectively saying, hey, Asia, put out our CO2, burn the coal, get it to us, because we want to be green. All right? Zero emissions? There's one atmosphere in the world. If we're just exporting our manufacturing somewhere else, this is not addressing emissions into the atmosphere. It's a shell game. Companies are doing it, buying offsets. States are doing it. Countries are doing it. This is critical. And look, just came out in Science not long ago. Policies that achieve major emissions reductions. I zoom in. They tracked 1,500 policies. 63 of them worked, or sort of have worked. 63 out of 1,500. Even the New York Times had to put out a piece talking about this. They struggle to cut emissions. The study's fine. It's hard to do this. Intentions are good. These guys had good intentions. They're putting in posts to keep people from parking next to the building, okay? They forgot where they parked. They're not getting out. And this is policy. Policy post, policy post, policy. We never pull the posts out because you can't. You're a flip-flopper. This is one of the great challenges. How do you reduce emissions? It's hard. A combination of the right tech at the right price. You have to make big scale in a time frame that matters for climate. It's hard. These all have to happen. Here's the things that are sort of working. Natural gas, nuclear replacing coal. That's driven it down here and in Europe. And big tech is leading the nuclear thing. They're the ones that have to. I don't know if you've been keeping up with this story, but tech needs so much electricity. Data centers, AI, all our searches. And they're going to partner with nuclear. We're opening up, we're taking nuclear power plants out of mothballs. Microsoft, 3 Mile Island, et cetera. Hydrogen, geothermal hydro, these are sort of the newbies. Hydro isn't, been around a while. Carbon capture, direct air capture, nature solutions, pulling it out of the atmosphere, or out of the release and putting it under the ground. Exxon is leading here. They just announced a 271,000 acre offshore site. Each year it's going to capture almost 7 million tons of CO2 and put it under the ground. Big deal, big expense. Got a daughter-in-law that works at Exxon in this group. How much is that? 6 million tons. Oh, it's 0.13% of US emissions, and it's 6 hours of China emissions. The biggest site in the country so far, 6 hours of China emissions? This is a brutal scale problem, okay? I'm not criticizing CCS. I built a group 25 years ago leading the tech in this, but it's not easy. Solar, wind, batteries are scaling and growing, and finally, how about some efficiency and conservation a little bit? Do a little more with less. Challenges there, but we can do better there as well. So this climate, this atmosphere, what we're really talking about here is the impacts of climate. The leading body, the one that the COP26 or 29 in Baku is talking about, is the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They're the leading thinking body on this. Their most recent report, AR6, Working Group 1, Chapter 12, Table 12.2, okay? It looks at all the impacts of climate change. What does it say? Again, this is the top group. It says that the signal has already emerged. What that means is it's more than happened in the past or less. CO2 and warming. The blues and the oranges don't meet their criteria for formal criteria for detection of change yet, but they will probably. Okay, what hasn't left the historical norms? Everything. You're looking at me, I'm looking at you, I saw this, I said, floods? Nope, we haven't left the normal yet. Every time it rains a lot, you hear it, worst storm ever, biggest floods ever. Tell that to the people in Paris in 1910, when the Seine went up 8 meters and they were in boats in the streets 114 years ago. Pre-climate change, human climate change. And then droughts and fires and winds and hurricanes and snow and ice levels and rate of sea level rise. None of these things have left their historical window yet. Leading report. They're looking at what might, but every time you hear it's the worst on record and it's getting worse, not yet, but it could. And it's really important to differentiate those two things. I'm surprised we don't do more of it and make that more known. Because what that says to me in this interconnected system is we have some time. We have some time, okay? It isn't a 10-year existential threat to humans existing on Earth. And I don't giggle when I say that. I've had classes in major universities south of here. Half the kids in the class raised their hand when I said, how many think humans won't be here in 15 years? Half raised their hands. And I went home depressed. Because I want to be here in 15 years. I'm selfish, you know. We have time. These are the data. Brings us back to energy from biofuels all the way to nuclear, less dense to more dense. What are the impacts of these things? Well, I think every one of them thinks they're the proud bald eagle of energy. You know, we are that thing. But when you look at it a little differently, eagles are kind of weird looking too, you know. They have some pros and cons. There's some trade-offs in here. So let's quickly go through this. Biofuels, you got to grow it, you got to process it, refine it, move it, burn it. It's just a hydrocarbon when it's converted. It's not clean. How about solar and wind and batteries? You mine for the stuff, you make it into collection systems. I have a young man here who explained that to the class today. You deploy it, you move it, and then you dump it. And take a look. I mean, this is our first film in Spain. I'm thinking, where are all these going to go when they wear out? Because they wear out in 15 to 20 years, and sometimes a little more catastrophically, it's after a hailstorm. Look at the tornado that came through after Milton in Florida. It just went right through a solar field. Okay, scattered them to the winds. Have you seen lithium mining? You can see it from space. Go check it out in South America. And it's not green. One wind turbine footprint, rebar, going to fill it with concrete so it won't tip over. These are the blades. We don't recycle them. This is Wyoming, a big earth mover, burying blades cut into a third. Texas, Sweetwater, we got a lot of wind turbine blades. They're not toxic, but they're big. And then they have their own damages as well. That's East Coast, not long ago, Nantucket area. And how about oil and gas and coal? All of it. You got to mine for the coal, big open pits, they fill them. Mountaintop isn't great. Burn it. SOx, NOx, mercury, particulates, CO2. Hydraulic fracking. There's issues. They're not like unsustainable kinds of things, but you got to keep it clean. There's some bad actors, not many. But there's challenges environmentally here. And nuclear waste, this is in France, at Le Hague. We'll show you that in our first film. You've got to do something with it. These things they come from the earth. We build them into collection systems, whatever it is. We collect energy, they wear out, and we dump them in the earth, and we do it over and over. And the point here, there's no renewable energy. I said this in a TED Talk to 1,100 students. And I was watching their eyes and seeing if, it's Texas, so I was seeing if anybody actually pulled on me. I had Kevlar on, and I'm here. But boy, what do you mean there's no renewable energy? Well, I just explained why. And it's okay, but all forms have trade-offs, all forms of energy. The road to success, there are no shortcuts, There just aren't. And we can keep telling our kids there's pretty energy and there's ugly energy. Yeah. But it's not doing them any favors. We're not doing, how many students are here tonight? Put up your hand. That's so awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for organizing this. You know this isn't black and white. You know it's not clean and dirty. You know it's not binary. You're smart. You know this is a tough problem. So when we get to my final thoughts here, as we start to close it up, I ran this scenario out to 2030, or sorry, yeah, 2060, sorry. There's an infinite number of scenarios. This is just one. Coal going down, oil going down. Natural gas is going up in this scenario. Nuclear is going up. Hydro, solar, and wind are growing tremendously. This is the actual energy consumption, the actual data. I roll it over. As we get more efficient, population growth slows. But look at that. This is 2065. There's a lot of coal, oil, and gas in there still in this scenario, 30% renewable. And some of you thought, well, I thought it was gone in 10 years. That's what I've heard. You know, it scares the crap out of you, maybe. You feel like you're in the running of the bulls, and you're just getting trampled by this thing. This is the winner of the last photo taken contest. All right. There are some great runner-ups, but that one won. Here it is, and it's called business as usual, that scenario. Is it? Watch close. This is in units. This is the energy mix. This is the same exact data in a percentage. Look from left to right. And there's the COVID dimple. You barely see it. Coal and oil are more than cut in half. Natural gas and nuclear more than double. Solar, wind, everything else go from 6 to 30%, 5x growth. The right side looks nothing like the left side. It's not business as usual in that energy mix. And it's, what is it? It's carbon to hydrocarbons, methane, hydrogen, uranium, and thorium. It's this transition of density in physics and economics pushing us already that direction. Why is it good? Well, you got some dispatchable energy, and you've got some intermittent energy, and you put them together, and they're reliable. It's a nice partnership. A lot more diversity on the right-hand side of this thing. But if you take coal, oil, nuclear, and gas out, it's not more diverse. And it's intermittent. That's not reliable. Nobody's going to do that beyond some percentage of it. Okay? This is important. Optionality for reliable energy. Markets like options, so do people. So this transition, I worry some of our leaders, a lot of our leaders, here we are, today's energy, and we're going to go to tomorrow's energy, just like this guy does. Ready? In flip-flops. Maybe this is the future governor of California. I don't know. In flip-flops. That's not a transition. That's a leap of faith. He lived, but if he didn't make it, it's over. Let's just agree on one thing. If not, this is stupid. All right, don't do that. What is an energy? As simple as I can boil it down. Adding more energy for those who have none, lowering emissions, and the land, the air, and the water. That's the simple formula. Here's our world. You've seen it already. Fade into the world at night. This is a remarkable satellite composite. See where the lights are bright? See where they're dim? Where do people live? This is the mixes of energy around the world, same color scheme. This is how much is consumed proportionally. Asia makes half of our stuff, and they consume half the world's energy. And you get rid of coal and oil, the foundational energies. Some is left. Gas is a fossil. We don't like nuclear. And you know, hydro is kind of messes with the environment too. Let's get rid of that. And what's left? 6%. We're not going to do it instantly, but even if it was a reasonably quick, 6%. And look at the regions with none. I'm going to dim the lights, 94%. How does that look to you? Seriously, how does that look? Kind of like the past. Turn them on. In fact, more people need them. We need that energy. 1 billion people, hunger, clothing, shelter. They have none. Another 1 billion or 2, education, healthcare. Women are disadvantaged by energy poverty. They go for the water. They're indoors with wood. They're not in the schools. Population directly tied to education, tightly correlated, and to energy. Immigration, migration away from autocrats. Give me hope somewhere else. And building and investing in the environment, adapt and mitigate to climate change. It's all underpinned by secure energy. It's the foundational substance of society. It underpins all these challenges. So what's the answer, Doc? You know, well, nothing is written in stone, okay? Except this, which is written on a stone. Carved in a stone. It's not binary. It's kind of complex. Involves a lot of things, and you're studying them. And that's okay. Complexity is not a bad thing. We know that energy security underpins economic security. I hope I've showed you that. Allows us to invest in the environment. We know there's a lot of fear in the world, and it's being propagated by people who want to scare you into acting quickly and without thinking. All right? Beginning of wisdom is to do away with fear. Let's get rid of it. We don't think clearly when we're scared. And we have time. So we get rid of that fear and we say, yep, emerging economies need something affordable. Developing economies need something reliable. Developed, sustainable. It's all in there. The challenge, of course, is accelerating economic growth. And this may sound counterintuitive to you. We've actually got to accelerate this. We've got to get emerging economies out quicker, grow the radical middle faster, so they can afford to invest in our environment just like we do. That advances flourishing and it protects the environment. It's a framework for secure energy. So I'll leave you with some thoughts. Energy enables human flourishing, full stop. A lot of nations don't have secure energy. Showed you that data. Demand is going to grow for a while, not forever. No source has gone down yet. All forms have environmental impacts, and a portfolio increases security. Now here's some musings, if you will. It's tough to negotiate with physics, right? We can try with policy, but it doesn't work forever. No one has a patent on truth. I don't. We seek it. We're seeking energy truth, and it's hard. We just seek it. And the fear narrative. Canceling. Civil dialogue is vital. We have time to think critically and act wisely. Students, leave you with these thoughts. It's not simple, but it's solvable, okay? A lot of complexity in it, but we need you, okay? It takes science and engineering. It takes business, economics, policy and law, communications, and more. It takes everything you're studying in this complex problem. It requires some humility. None of us know it all. Civility, non-binary thinking. Global citizens look at all of humanity and all of nature. We've got to lift everybody up and protect the environment. So I have confidence in you. I know you will solve this because you're getting a broad education and you're brilliant, okay? You're going to work hard on it, though. It's going to be very challenging. But again, I need you. I'm old. I started Medicare this month. And, you know, take care of me. So I'll leave you with a few free resources. Our films, this is all free stuff online. TED Talk, for those of you who want a digestible. This PBS series is remarkable. 2 guests on every episode. We're about to film season 7. High-level people, secretaries, business leaders, NGOs, academics. Really fun stuff. Our K-12 stuff on Switch is great. Some other talks. I was even on Jordan Peterson's podcast. That was a romp, you know, if you follow him. Anyway, you can shine your phones up here and get access to all this stuff. And I want to really thank you for your attention tonight. Thank you. How we doing? Well, a little long. We got some time for questions, I think. I think there's microphones available. So I'm happy to talk about whatever you'd like to. I know some of you need to head out.
You had one slide that touched on mitigation.
Just wait 1 second. Okay. We'll let those who need to go, and then I'll be able to hear you better, and I'll be able to repeat it. All right. Let's go.
you had a slide that touched on mitigation and adaptation.
Yeah.
And I just got done reading Kunin's book, Unsettled.
Yeah.
And he implies, and I want you to expand on that a little bit if you could, that we'd be better off spending the trillions of dollars on mitigation and adaptation rather than try to force a round peg into a square hole on some of these renewables. Could you?
Yeah, Steve Koonin is a good friend of mine, a real good friend, physicist, wrote Unsettled. He was Undersecretary of Energy under Obama first term, brilliant physicist, National Academy, provost at Caltech in his early 40s, He does, and he doesn't imply both. He says we'd be better spending that money on adaptation than mitigation. And the reason he implies that and says it now pretty overtly is, well, you know what you get when you adapt. You know what you're building, you know what it costs for the most part, and you know where it's going to end, what you're going to improve. Mitigation is less knowable. You could put a lot of money into it. Mitigation would mean lower CO2 emissions around the world, heading toward other lower parts, net zero or something, net something. And it may work and it may not. Some may play, some may not. We know it's going to cost a whole lot. Every estimate now shows the cost. So significantly less money to globally work on adaptation and improve everyone's circumstance than to take a risk only on mitigation. I kind of like both. A little mitigation. I'd like to see CO2 emissions start to come down. I think we can do that in the ways I showed without hurting humans, with some results, but also not spending the levels of money that we're spending for just that. You bet. What else you got? Students all went to the volleyball game. I shouldn't have told them about it.
If you were to take a quantum of natural gas, one option would be to put it in a natural gas-powered vehicle. The other option would be to take that natural gas, use it to power an electricity plant, take that quantum of electricity, transfer it over power lines, and put it in an electric vehicle. Which is more efficient, to use that quantum of natural gas in a gas-powered vehicle, or when you convert it to electricity and send it over transmission lines, and of course you lose some of it.
Right.
Does that resulting electricity that goes into an electric vehicle, will that take you as far as if you put that quantum of natural gas in a natural gas-powered vehicle?
No, it won't. So you'll get more bang for the buck, more mileage by putting compressed natural gas into a vehicle and driving it, okay? That said, that's not the only piece of the equation people are working on. So if I produce natural gas, gas processing, move it on a pipeline, get it to the vehicle's filling station, let's say fleets, which is more efficient, and then put it in a car and burn it, there's a lot that goes on in that chain. And there's a lot of emissions in that chain, including methane, as well as CO2. If I take the natural gas to a power plant and burn it and make electricity, there's less that goes on to do that. And if I capture the CO2 from that power plant and put it under the ground, then the electricity I make with the losses you've described goes into a battery. And on an emission sense, that's a much lower emissions than if you're just burning the fuel directly. So what objective function are you trying to solve, right? And if you try to optimize on those, it depends. You can be more efficient and more CO2 if you're close to the gas plant, if you've got fleets, if you can make that combustion engine go twice as far. A lot of studies now are showing there's a crossover point between total emissions to make all the stuff for EVs, and they cross over a combustion engine at some point, again, depending on a lot of things, where it all comes from, that you could extend that crossover point with a much more efficient combustion engine that burns gas. So in a pure emission sense, these things are not easy to figure out. On a pure efficiency sense, the way you defined it, which is how far can I drive that vehicle on a equivalent, MMBTU, you're better just putting gas in the car, natural gas in the car. So, and there's other things you got to optimize on too. So these are real challenges. They're not black and white things. They're not binary things. Some people don't have gas, natural gas, anywhere nearby. So they make their electricity somewhere else and charge a battery. You know, some of us have a bunch of natural gas, and that makes it. Aubrey McClendon was a good friend of mine. He's in our first film. And of course, Chesapeake, big natural gas person. And he talked about that quite a bit, and he was moving CNG into Oklahoma. We filmed the Fort Worth bus system, which was all CNG for our first film, fleets, and showed the efficiency. But he was Oklahoma led in CNG for a while in vehicles. Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, hey.
Hey, Scott.
Hey,
how are
my
you?
fellow state geologist.
I
Actually,
think I
I'm
might
not
be
anymore.
Maybe one or two geologists in the room, but actually that's my question for you, or request, if you will. I suspect there aren't terribly many people in the audience who have a deep understanding of geology, and you do. And I wondered if you could just take a second or two to maybe connect the geosciences and our understanding of the subsurface and geologic time, and where that science is and where it might be going, because it is evolving, I think, and always bringing more gain to society. Dealer's choice there. So.
Yeah. Nick is your state geologist in Oklahoma, for those who haven't met him. He runs a state survey right here at OU. So good to see you. Thanks for being here. A lot in that question. You know, there's a lot to unpack. I'm a geologist. I'm not opposed to mining. I think we got to mine. I don't pretend like it's green. We're getting better in the rich world. We regulate it more. That's why we export it to the other parts of the world that don't regulate it much. And it's not just environmental. There's human rights issues with some of that too. Child labor and other kinds of things. So we got to be better when we mine for our metals for various things, including solar, wind, and batteries. But it comes from the earth. Everything comes from the earth. We don't grow it. And so geology, geosciences is needed for all of it. And I say that with the obvious bias being one, but it's needed for all of it. I think you kind of implied some deep time stuff there too, and climate maybe. You know, as we know, when you look back, and I didn't put that in tonight, but I have it. When you look back in time, the world is actually in one of its coolest periods of Earth history today. Not in the 100,000 year sense, it's warmer than it was 20,000 to 95,000 years ago when we were as glaciers on New York City and Michigan. Okay, but these glacial interglacial cycles, we call them the length span cycles, are about 100,000 years. We've had 10 of them in the last million years when ice is on New York City, and then it retreats. 10 in a million years. Humans have been here throughout. Humanoids have been here 3 million years, the beginning of Stone Age. So we've weathered cold and warm before, but there weren't nearly as many of us. But if you look at the longer trends, the geologic trends, the ones we try to study, you go back to the Cretaceous 65 million years ago to 220 million years ago in the whole Mesozoic, it was really warm on Earth. Atmospheric CO2 was between 5 and 8,000 parts per million, not 420 or 430, 5 to 8,000. Naturally, CO2 is a food. Things were big in the Cretaceous. The Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. There were large land-living creatures. We call them dinosaurs. Plants were big. There was a lot of food, but they had adapted to it, okay? So people say, oh, it was warmer in the past. Yeah, but there are reasons, but it had adapted to it. So we have cooled down overall since then remarkably, and I'm talking 4 to 10 degrees C warmer than today, not 1 or 2. We'd adapted to it. Life had. So here we sit in these glacier interglacials, and we are forcing warming today. The things we're doing, CO2 and methane and other burning of fossil fuels, is forcing some things warmer today. What I showed you was the impacts of that forcing from the leading body, and they're honest about it. So that's what affects us. That's what affects us, and what would help. I'm going to be very candid here. In my travels, people in that 5 billion, when I talk to them about climate change, they say, yeah, we know about it, but that's not my leading issue. Education, food. How about an air conditioner to help with the warming like you have in Houston, or a heater to help with the cold like you have in Michigan? okay? They know now because I've put a 40-watt panel on a little teeny home in the middle of Kenya in the Maasai country. And the first thing they got when they had a 40-watt solar panel was a cell phone. I promise you, every time they get a cell phone first and charge it, and now connected to the world, they know. Everybody knows about how the world is now. It's not a secret anymore. So these are some of the things I think in geology. Earth resources are vital to this whole story. We've got to produce them well, manage them well, reuse them, recycle them to the best of our abilities. That's expensive to do. Minimize their use, be as efficient as we can, but still lift the world up from poverty until such time as population rolls over. And that's a whole other story, but I'm just going to give you the sneak peek. We just did a population episode on our PBS show. It's a lot sooner than you think when it rolls over this century, and when it rolls, it plummets. It doesn't plateau. It starts to fall fast. Population, whole different set of challenges. Some good, some not so good. So all these things make me say we have some time, but boy, when you start thinking of doing all this without reasonably understanding the subsurface of the earth, good luck. You know, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. So that's a plug for us, but it's an easy plug to make. So. Yes, sir.
What we can really say to our students about the nuclear fusion technology?
Okay. Yeah, again, we did an episode on fusion. Really fun. Sabrina Johal has become a friend. She came from Montana, never left Montana before she got out of high school. Ended up being in charge of the nuclear reactor on an aircraft carrier in the Navy. And then go to the private sector. And she understands fusion pretty well. So did our other guest. He was the head of the Department of University of Wisconsin, nuclear. I used to giggle, I'm not a nuclear person, but I've keynoted a bunch of nuclear things for some reason. I don't know why. Every time they call me and say, will you come talk and keynote this nuclear conference? I say, oh, I don't know anything about nuclear. Yeah, but we want you to come talk. Okay, we'll try. But I used to laugh and say, it's 30 years away and always will be. Not any longer. It's essentially here technologically now. We can capture more energy out of the fusion reaction. What we have in nuclear today, for those who, we split the molecules. Okay, the heat comes from the splitting, and you got to contain that reaction. And you got to deal with the waste, fission products. The fusion is fusing things, and it's not uranium and thorium. We're fusing on the real light end of the periodic table. And that makes heat too. So you got to constrain that reaction. And there's two ways to do it. And they talked about both of those confinement processes. But the heat is incredible from that. And all it does is boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, run a generator. That's what you're using the heat for. There's no magic after that. But we have now gotten more energy out of that reaction than went into it with a bunch of lasers at the point. So really it's more now about getting it from there to something that you could go through the process to commercialize. That's a ways off still. Commercialization of fusion, unless there's some major huge breakthroughs or massive investments, is a ways off. This administration, proud of them, just announced we want to triple nuclear in the US. The Biden administration. Triple it. That'd be great. How are we going to do that? It's not just the technology, a little bit. It's the whole regulatory process. The NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and its processes for reviewing and installing. The holdup of all that process. We allow a lot of holdup to the point where sometimes those things get killed 10 years in. No CEO is going to bet the farm on that when it might get killed 10 years in. We've got to get reasonable regulation and then remove the thing and let it go forward once it's been approved. I think fusion is coming. I'm 65. Will I see it commercial in my lifetime? If medicine improves a lot, I will. But if not, maybe not commercial scale, but my kids will, and I firmly believe that. And that's going to be a game changer. Going to be a game changer. So We're having a little reception, I think.
We are.
And I'm happy to visit more out there for sure.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
join me
Yeah.
in